Hello, and welcome to Maui Community College's Preserving Our Recollections. I'm Catherine Fletcher, and with me today is a very, very interesting gentleman. We've been talking for a few minutes, and I can't wait for you to hear this story. Why don't you tell me your full name?
My full name is Harold Gustav Olsten.
Are there any nicknames you're known by?
Well, nobody knows me as Harold on Maui except my wife, Shirley. So my nickname is Ole.
You're Ole.
Yeah, so if you walk into one of our stores and ask for Harold, they won't know who you mean.
Where and when were you born, Ole?
Well, I was born in DeKalb, Illinois, a little town, little college town, an agricultural town in northern Illinois on October 6, 1926. It's a college town, Northern Illinois University. It was a college at that time, now it's a university. Now, one of my uncles was a teacher there, a professor.
And your parents, what are their names?
Harold Holcomb Olsten. Mm-hmm. But so I wasn't called Junior.
No.
And my mother was Ruth. Her maiden name was Ruth Anderson.
I think we have a beautiful picture here. These are your parents, yes?
Yeah, that's my father on the right and my mother on the left, and really proud of them. I had wonderful parents, really.
Do you have any siblings?
I have one sister.
Mm-hmm. What's her name?
No brothers. Her name is Janice.
Mm-hmm.
Janice Ladd.
Your parents were born in the United States?
Well, they were both born in DeKalb, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how about their parents?
Well, their parents were both born in Sweden,
and
both families. And we've been back and visited Sweden, but that's where they were born. And then they immigrated to DeKalb, Illinois. I think they started out in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. with a bunch of other Swedes, but then they moved to DeKalb.
So you have quite the Swedish connection.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about your family life when you were young. What was it like growing up in this DeKalb?
Well, you know, growing up, I was very fortunate. I had wonderful parents. Really wonderful parents. I had a wonderful childhood. You know, they were loving parents, told each other they loved each other.
What did your father do for a living?
You got to get me out of the emotional stage here.
That's what I'm trying to do.
No, my father worked for his father, who had a meat market and slaughterhouse in town.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any idea how your parents met? Or?
You know, I don't. My wife and I talked about that, but I'm not sure how they met. I really don't know.
But they really provided a wonderful life for you.
Oh, wonderful, yeah. I couldn't have had better parents, really.
And you went to your grammar school and high school?
I went to grammar school in DeKalb. We moved away from there when I was 8 years old, so I went to grammar school and high school in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh.
That's really where I grew up.
I see. And were there any things that you learned in school that you particularly enjoyed? A subject or a teacher?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
I enjoyed the shops. I went to a technical high school, Lindblom High School.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned all the technical things, like even casting and auto shop, machine shop, wood shop, all the trades too, and I really liked that.
Mm-hmm. So you enjoyed working with your hands?
Yeah, so I learned how to work with my hands, and that had a little bit helped when we moved to Hawaii. I'll tell you about that later.
What happened when you graduated from high school?
Well, when I graduated from high school, before I graduated, this was Second World War time. I graduated in 1944, and that was getting near the end of the year, or the end of the war. It had about a year to go yet, but we enlisted. I enlisted in the Air Force.
Did you?
So right out of high school, I went away into the Air Force. And I was in that for 14 months.
14 months.
And the war was over, and they let us go home.
Did you see any action overseas, or?
No.
No.
No, I was in at the tail end of the war. Mm-hmm. But it was a good experience for me.
Why was it a good experience? What did you learn?
Well, I learned a lot of discipline, for one thing. And I learned how to accept my sergeant telling me what to do and obeying the rules.
Mm-hmm. So that was something you learned in the Air Force. What do you think you carried into the Air Force with you that you learned from your parents, perhaps?
Well, probably I was disciplined at home,
mm-hmm.
too, so that helped me accept, what you go through in boot camp when you get into the Army or the Navy or the Marines or any of those branches. It's really tough. So I was able to handle that and cope with that. But I was disciplined when I was little.
That gave you
with
structure.
Spankings.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
That's when I quit smoking at 8 years old.
Well, that's a good thing.
My mother caught me with a bubble pipe with tobacco in it that I had been smoking. And she spanked me, and I've never been able to smoke. I probably tried it 100 times, and it was like I've been hypnotized all these years.
Mothers are wonderful that way.
They are.
Well, what happened after you were released from the Air Force?
Well, when I was released, my father had sold the business, the meat market and grocery, and he had gone to work for the Office of Price Administration as an investigator. So I got a job doing that, being a federal investigator for the Office of Price Administration. Because at that time there were black market dealers in meat and gasoline, and so they put me in the meat department, which was something that I knew from growing up in a meat market.
What were your job duties?
Well, really to stake out places. I remember staking one I'll call Barney's Show Club in a kind of a rough part of Chicago, and watching for black market meat to arrive. And one time a truck pulled up and they started unloading dressers, wooden dressers, and they'd bring it up to the back door of Barney's Show Club. And of course I went over and looked in the drawers, and it was meat.
Oh.
So that was the first place I busted.
Well, how long did you have that job?
Oh, I think only about a year, and then they disbanded the Office of Price Administration, and then people didn't have to use food stamps anymore.
Yes. And where did you go from there?
Then, when I was in the service, my dad took that job, but he had bought a farm. He had sold the meat market and used the money to buy a farm, not far from DeKalb, Illinois, where I was born. So we went farming after that. And we hadn't been farmers, but we lived in farm area, and my father always wanted to be a farmer. So we had to read books.
To learn how to farm, yes.
Yeah, to learn how to farm. So we had bought a 230-acre farm, mostly for raising corn and soybeans. And actually, that's where Shirley and I spent the first 8 or 10 years of our marriage on the farm.
But you met Shirley, your wife, where?
Well, I met her in Chicago.
In Chicago. In fact, I've heard a little story about how you met her. You want to share that with us?
Oh, yes. We had some mutual friends because of the church we went to on the north side of Chicago, where my parents had moved to before we moved to the farm. But I was invited to a New Year's Eve party at one of my friends, Jim Bergstrom, and I went without a date. We were supposed to bring a date, but I didn't have a date, so But I went anyway, and he lived in an apartment building, a 2-story apartment building, which is real common in Chicago, and he lived on the 2nd floor, and I got introduced to Shirley, and I thought, I want to know her a little better. So in those days, they had screws that screwed in the fuse box in the basement. So I snuck out, went down to the basement, and unscrewed the fuses for the 2nd floor. And of course, then Jim Bergstrom, the host, had to find out why the electricity went off. So he left Shirley, and I got to know Shirley then.
Well, apparently it worked out pretty well.
Wonderful. We've had a wonderful life together.
And how long after that was it that you were married?
Oh, a year and a half, I think. Yeah, we became engaged.
And you have to tell the story of the engagement.
Well, this is the days of railroad trains, and she had gone away to college at Gustavus Adolphus in Minnesota, and I already loved her, and I knew that was the girl for me. So when she came home on a trip one time, I met her at the train station, and I had bought a diamond ring, and I put it in a box of candy, Fannie Mae candy, and I wrapped it in a ribbon and put it in that box. And then when she got off the train, we got in the car, and I pulled it out of the glove compartment. Here's a box of candy for you. And she loves Fannie Mae candy, so especially the dark chocolate with the light centers. So she opened it up, and then she saw that ring and a bow, and that was one of the highlights.
Well, I'm sure she said yes after that.
She did say yes, yeah. And then she decided to come home and discontinue college in a while after that semester or whatever.
And so you were
And then
married.
a year and a half later, we got married.
And eventually moved to the farm. How long did you farm?
Well, we farmed from about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
We farmed, yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed farming.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my dad's dream, and I really liked it. And being that I, grew up in the technical high school that I attended, I was able to fix equipment and machinery, and that's what you have to do on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to become your own mechanic. You can't be calling a mechanic out there all the time to work on the tractors and the discs and the plows and all that. So it was a wonderful life for us for 10 years, and 2 of our children got to be on the farm for a little while. Mm-hmm. And Bruce, our oldest son, for about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then Richie came along, and he was on the farm, and David, our youngest son, never got to be on the farm.
What happened after the farming? What did you do?
Well, after the farm, my dad sold the farm, and I didn't have a profession or a trade other than farming. Mm-hmm. So we moved to Rockford, Illinois, and that's where my parents moved, and I had to find a job. So not having a trade or profession, about the easiest job to get was as a salesman. So my first job as a salesman was putting on dinner parties with cookware in homes. I sold Lifetime stainless steel. And we cooked, it was a waterless cooking procedure, and of course I burnt the first meal. But that was very good for me.
Why was it good for you?
Well, coming out of the service, going to the farm, I was kind of a bashful kid. And I remember the first appointment I had to put on this dinner party. There were about 10 people there, and I was cooking the meal, and you had to give a health talk. And I remember my knees just shook. My knees trembled just like they did when I was waiting for Shirley to come down the aisle when we got married. But then I got over that by doing it. So it was a fear I had, but I got through the fear by doing the thing I feared.
Mm-hmm. So you were a salesman for how long?
Oh, that went on until about 1967 when we moved to Maui. But I went from that to Encyclopedia Britannica. First I went with Sears. They had an encyclopedia. Then I went to Britannica. And I ended up then from that selling metalworking equipment. Rockford, Illinois is known for machinery. And I went to work selling hydraulic controlled presses, numerically controlled presses, and hydraulic punch presses.
Well, that's considerably different from cookware.
Oh yeah, and I liked that because that was calling on purchasing agents in factories, and that was I liked that kind of selling.
Well, what was the impetus for you to pick up and move to Maui? My goodness, that's a very big change of life.
Well, there's a lot of snow in Chicago and Rockford, and I came home one day, and I remember when it snowed, we get a big snow, and Shirley would say, "You better shovel that walk in the driveway." I say, "Honey, it will melt in the summer. You know, and that's not long before that'll be here. And guys have heart attacks shoveling snow."
Did she listen to you?
the day I came home, it wasn't snowing. I came home one day and I said, "Honey, I think God wants us to move to Hawaii." Not sure where that came from. I did have one cousin that had moved to Hawaii, to Oahu, and Dellenbeck, his name was, and they moved to Oahu, so I knew about that, but we'd never been to Hawaii.
Oh my.
But then Shirley said, "Well, if God wants us to move to Hawaii, He'll give us a sign." So I says, "Well, I want to put a sign out in front for sale by owner. Can I put an ad in the paper?" She says, "No, a sign like, if the first person that comes buys the house, then I'll know it's God's plan for us." So I put the sign out. We put an ad in the Chicago Tribune, and a lady called. The paper hadn't even come out to the stands yet, but she saw it in the paper ahead of time, and she knocked on her door. We had company, and she said, "Could I look at your house?" I said, "Well, we're having company." She said, "I'd really like to see it." So she was alone. We let her in and showed her the house, and she says, "Oh, I like this house. I want it."
There's your sign.
So that was the sign. So within 1 month, we had sold the house, closed the deal, had our money, and were on the airplane on the way to Hawaii.
Why did you choose Maui?
I don't know, we looked at a map, and it was like the word Maui just was like a neon sign. It just stuck out. So we had to go through Oahu because there were no direct flights to Maui then. And I think we stayed on Oahu 1 or 2 nights, but we knew we were going. We had tickets to go all the way through to Maui.
Yeah.
So, and we came to Maui, and we've been here ever since. It was a real good decision. Probably because it was God's plan.
I think that's right. Let me see. This is a picture of the family when you came to Maui.
Yeah. Now my mother's on there too, but she didn't move here. But she came and visited us, and this was one of the first pictures we took of the whole family. It's my 3 sons.
Can you tell me what their names are?
Well, this is David. That's the youngest one. He now works for he's a liquor inspector. He's their chief investigator, a senior investigator. And this is Richard. He's a full-time helicopter pilot. And this is Bruce, our oldest son, and he works with me in the T-shirt factory. And that's Shirley, my first wife, and only wife, and that was my mother. She was visiting, and that's where we took the picture.
And this was when?
Well, let's see, the date should be on the back, but...
February 1968.
1968. So we got here in October 67, so...
And
that's what we looked like then.
What did you do once you got here?
Well, I looked for a job. Now, I had been selling metalworking equipment. That wasn't really here yet. Still isn't today. There are no factories that need metalworking equipment to produce like TV sets and things like that. So I looked for a job in selling, though, and I couldn't find a job selling. So what I did, I started interviewing tourists and asking them, because there was sugar and there was pineapple, and there were tourists. Well, I couldn't buy a pineapple plantation or sugar plantation, so I started interviewing tourists and asking them, while you're visiting here, what would you like to take home with you? And invariably they said, I'd like to take something from Maui, something made in Maui. So after some investigation, looking around, I found that black coral jewelry was was a product that was from Hawaii. Divers would go down in Lahaina, and they'd have scuba tanks, and they would chop off the black coral trees, and so I started buying black coral. Now, you can't make jewelry immediately. You have to dry it. It has to age. But I started buying black coral. We got two locations in Wailuku. One was on Vineyard Street. The other was on Central. One place for drying it and the other place for manufacturing it. And I had the experience calling on, wholesaling the metalworking equipment, but now I was going to be wholesaling jewelry.
And you made
so
this
that's
jewelry.
A picture. Yeah, so we started making jewelry. Now that's where my education in Lindblom Technical High School helped. I knew how to hold a file flat, and I knew what a grinder was and a buffer was. And
this is some of your family, isn't it?
this is me, my wife, and my son Richie's on there somewhere, and that's my mother over there. She was here on vacation.
His mother.
Yeah. And
what a wonderful
that was
idea.
our first business. So I went out and wholesaled it and ended up with 200 accounts here on Maui. That was our little manufacturing plant on Vineyard Street. Next to us over here was Homemade Bakery, the Kazuki's. Mm-hmm. They have a new location now, but that was our first location for manufacturing the jewelry.
So
we didn't retail at the time, we just manufactured.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you involved with the black coral?
Well, we did that for about 1.5 years, and then someone wanted to buy it. Sageco Company was a holding company on Oahu, mm-hmm. So I sold it to them.
And then what?
Well, they worked for them for a little while, continuing going, and then they wanted to move the plant to Honolulu, and we didn't want to move to Honolulu, so then I looked for something else. And the next thing that was starting out then was T-shirts. Mm-hmm. That was pretty new. Crazy Shirts was in existence, Rick Olsten, but what he was doing was spray painting designs on T-shirts while you waited in Honolulu at Waikiki Marketplace. Mm-hmm. And that's how he got started, and then he got into retail from that. So I started selling for someone else T-shirts. Someone that was just setting up a plant. They had been magazine salesmen, but now they wanted to do T-shirts in Hawaii. So I started to work for them as the salesman. Now, unbeknown to me, they didn't even have the plant set up. But I had met somebody here on Maui that knew how to do that, so we took him to Honolulu. He set up the plant. And then I was the salesman, the only salesman, and worked for them. And then after a year or two, we started our own because they had a little problem within the company. So we started one year called First Hawaiian Shirts, and we made a DBA T-shirt factory because we were manufacturing at the time, putting the designs on the shirts. And that was our first location. There was an old commissary building from the Second World War out at the airport, on airport property. So we started that. All three boys were a little bit involved at the time. Richard was the most involved. Bruce did some bookkeeping, my oldest son. And David, his hobby in school was photography. Oh. So we photographed some old designs out of Hawaiian books You should see some. I didn't bring any of those pictures with. Those were our first designs. And then we painted the building. It was called the Red Barn here on Maui.
Well, I think you had some interesting ways of advertising.
Yeah, this is a little promotion we did before I think it was about the time that we were going to open the store at the Maui Mall.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first retail store from the factory. In 1975, we decided to get out of the wholesale business. I was traveling too much all the time. Richard would stay here and screen the shirts. We kind of got tired of that, so in 1975, we dropped the wholesale and started retail. So we opened the doors of that old building for retail, put a sign out in front, T-shirt factory, free pineapple juice. And the tourists started pulling in. And that was our first retail store. And this was the second one was at the Maui Mall. Mm-hmm. And then we did a little promotion where Richard and me being pilots, he dressed up as, like in that picture, and we called him the Phantom. And we'd say, when we opened that new store, we'd say, the Phantom is arriving on such and such a date. And we ran little tiny ads in the Maui News, all spread through the paper. The Phantom is arriving. And then he'd be there for the promotion.
And this, I think, is when you...
I think that was a retail store that, I'm not sure. Oh, that's the one we opened at the Maui Mall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's Reverend Sandy Sanderson, that did the blessing. And that's Richard and me and Reverend Sanderson, and these must be two of my grandchildren.
Must be.
I think it was Luana and Malia.
We've got some nice pictures
Richard's
of them.
Grandchildren.
This is...
Then there was a building,
like
that was the next one I think we opened. There was a building that's a pool hall now on Dairy Road, across from the Maui Marketplace. And they had different businesses in there, so we opened up, had a little kiosk in there. And we opened that up there.
I have to ask you, who had the marketing ideas, like the free pineapple juice? What a great hook to bring people in. Was that
you? I guess we were thirsty for pineapple juice, so we thought, at that time, they were doing that at the airport. When the tourists arrived at the airport, they would get free pineapple juice. So then being close to the airport, we put a sign up, free pineapple juice, visitors welcome. And then they came in for more free pineapple juice.
This looks kind of...
That's when they burned down that Red Barn building, and then they let us rent a parcel just down the street from there, about an acre, next to the Black Coral Factory.
So that's
that
what
became
this is.
this. This was a building that we built there. Mm-hmm. And that's still there. I think we built that about 15 or 20 years ago. And so that's our warehouse, our office, and we also have a retail store in there.
Ah. Are you still giving away free pineapple juice?
No.
Oh. Well,
they were spilling too much on the clothes.
Oh.
And for a while we were putting designs on with heat presses. Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't know that there was any pineapple spilled until we put the transfer on with this high heat. And that would burn the pineapple juice, and then pull that off, and then here's this big spot of burnt pineapple juice. So we had to quit that.
Yeah, I can see why. Now this is, let me see, did you sell the T-shirt factory, or you still have
No, we still have that. Always kept the T-shirt factory. We still have that today.
And
I still work there full time.
This is...
Oh, our next door neighbor that has the Black Coral Factory, he had this little stand on wheels, and he wasn't using it, so he said we could use it. So we took it down to Kihei, and there used to be a Paradise Fruit on the corner, and we had a drive-in, which I'll show later, which is right next door to this, but it was empty next to it, so we put that there, and that was our, just a little kiosk-like that we opened up there.
Any kind of business that you could do, apparently you were doing and doing very well.
Well, that was fun. I like new things.
Well,
and it's exciting for me to open up, do a new venture.
You certainly branched out. Now, can you tell me what this is?
Well, this was homemade island art, homegrown island art. And that was on Dairy Road. There's still a little strip mall there. That's what that real good Mexican restaurant is. What's the name of that?
I can't
Well,
recall.
anyway, it's in there. We were right on the corner, and that was fun. No, we still had the T-shirt factory, but the lady that had this wanted to sell it, and so we bought that and ran that for a while, and then sold
featured
that.
Local artists, is that correct?
Yeah, it was all local artists. Yeah, everything was made by people that lived here.
Well, let's see what else we have. Kihei Drive-In.
Oh, we had a lot of fun with that too. The way that happened, see, that one the lady wanted to sell it. This one, a friend of mine that had built that, was called the Doggy Bag. And he wanted to move back to the mainland. His wife's mother was very ill, and they wanted to go back and be with her. And he had just built that, and that was right next door where that little kiosk was that we had on wheels. So that's how I knew about that, plus I knew the man, Harry Norriger, and he said, "Holy, could you please buy this drive-in?" He says, we want to go back to the mainland. So I said, "Gee, Harry, we're in the T-shirt business. I don't know what I do with the drive-in. And besides, I don't have extra money to buy that." And he wanted $20,000. He said, "Well, just pay me when you can." So we took that over and made it cheeseburgers and nickel cup of coffee. And also I saw a sign on there which I'd forgotten about. We had hot malasadas. And we had fun with that and did good at it. Ended up selling it to Dairy Queen, and then they sold it to Alexander's Fish, is what it is now.
So we had T-shirts, we have an art gallery, we have the drive-in. Now this looks
What's that?
terrific. This is Mrs. Olsten's Cookies and Fudge.
Oh, when when the Rainbow Mall in Kihei opened, this space became available. We already had a T-shirt factory store in the Rainbow Mall, but this was open. So one of my sons, David, he loves to cook and bake. So we took that space over and painted it up like a rainbow and called it Mrs. Olsten's Fudge and Cookies. And David and I did that for, I don't know, a year or two, and then we sold that. And we started something else.
Gee, was that Maui famous cookies?
You're right. I guess that came next. Now, next door, Rodney Teixeira owned and still owns the Coral Factory. And he had started a little cookie company in there called Maui's Famous Cookies. And he wanted to quit that. So he asked me if we'd buy it. So it's always seemed like somebody wanted to sell something and it sounded interesting. And David liked to bake, so we took that over and began baking cookies and wholesaling cookies, and that was fun. But we were still doing the T-shirt factory along with that. But I went out and sold the cookies, and David and his wife baked the cookies, and that was a good experience too. I ate too many cookies, though. I gained a lot of weight, and I started having trouble with my stomach, and my doctor asked Dr. Hugh asked me one day, well, how many cookies do you eat? He said, I want you to keep track. So it's one day I kept track. They're so good when they come out of the oven. I ate 30.
Oh,
He said, that's your problem.
so you had to sell that one.
Yeah.
I hear a reoccurring theme throughout this is that it was available for some reason or other, and it was fun.
Right, right.
What a wonderful thing.
Each time this happened, we kind of took it as, well, this must be God's plan. Mm-hmm. So we just went ahead and did it.
That's why you're in Maui.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back at the family home, the children have grown up. They went to school here on Maui.
Oh yeah, they went to, well, David went to Wailuku Elementary. He was the youngest boy, and then Richie started out at EL. And then Bruce was in high school already, so he was in his senior year, so he went to Baldwin High School. Mm-hmm. And he graduated from there. All our boys graduated from Baldwin. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they all then married local girls.
And we have...
We'll come to that.
Here is...
And our family began to grow.
Mom, Dad, and the boys.
Yeah, that's our 3 sons and me, and Shirley says she has 4 boys. I'm one of the boys.
And I'm sure she's glad she does.
Yeah, so this is Richie, and he's full-time helicopter pilot now. Mm-hmm. He's doing what he loves to do. Bruce works with me in the office, and he takes care of all the money and all the bookkeeping, and he's really the chief financial officer. Mm-hmm. And then David, he's doing what he loves to do, so we've all found our niche. He is a senior investigator for the liquor department. Mm-hmm. And that's me on the left.
Oh, is that you? The 4th boy. But look what's happened to your family.
Now that's more what we look like now. This is a few years ago. I think there's about 22 of us there probably now, or 25, but today there's 33 of us. Started out with 5. Our sons all married local girls. Richard and David married sisters. Stephen Medeiros and Stephen and Mary Medeiros' daughters.
And what are their names?
And their names, Richie's wife is Stephanie, and David's wife is Linda. Mm-hmm. And then Bruce married a local girl too from Honolulu. Her last name was Rogers, mm-hmm. Rogers girl. And
her first name?
Her name is Gigi, mm-hmm. Gigi Olsten. She's a nurse. The other 2 are homemakers, and actually they have licensed care. They're taking care of children in their homes.
Yes, yes.
So we have a wonderful family, wonderful daughters-in-laws, and I have 3 wonderful sons and great grandchildren, wonderful grandchildren.
And some great-grandchildren, right? Let's see.
13 great-grandchildren now.
I know I have their pictures here somewhere.
Well, there's a couple of the more recent ones. This is Kahiao, and this is Anohea. They are grandchildren of Bruce, our oldest son.
And
this is Scott and Lonnie's children, 2 of them. They call him Little Oli. And this is Angelina. And then the little one is one of the very newest ones. And his name, I'm trying to think of his name, Akoni. Akoni. That's Dustin's and Stacy's little boy.
Beautiful, beautiful children.
Beautiful children. And, being they all married local girls, and we have, they're all part Hawaiian.
Didn't you tell me that one of your, was it
Well, Luana, our
daughters?
first granddaughter, she teaches hula, and she's very, has always been interested in carrying on the Hawaiian heritage.
And she's a
so
kumahula?
she's a kumahula, which is pretty rare. I think it was the first kumahula in 40 years.
That's incredible.
And yeah, that is incredible. And so she teaches hula still, usually has about 150 students, and teaches them Hawaiian. So they sing Hawaiian. And then she also works up at Kamehameha schools up country
Wonderful.
in teaching.
I think it's interesting that you're connected to the Hawaiian culture, but you're also involved with the Swedish culture. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. Well, when we got here, we didn't realize how many Swedes there were here, and Norwegians, Swedes and Norwegians, Scandinavians. And in 1981, we got here in 67. In 81, they were having a 100th anniversary of the arrival of the Swedes. And we didn't know that they had arrived in 1881, actually. And there's a plaque out at McGregor Point at the lighthouse. And we went to the 100th anniversary of the Scandinavians arriving here in Maui. And the first ones went to work for the sugar company. And then some went to work for the pineapple company. So we didn't know that some of our relatives got here a long time, that long ago, that long before us. Of course, we don't know if they're relatives or not.
Yeah.
But from Sweden and Norway.
And you mentioned that they had been brought here to work in what capacity?
Well, they had been brought here to work as craftsmen, cabinet makers. But the first ones they put to work in the pineapple field, and they didn't like that because they were craftsmen to build cabinets.
So I understand they complained.
They complained, stubborn Swedes, you know. They complained, and was actually, I don't know if it was a real strike, but they called it that. It was the first strike on Maui. They rebelled. So they took them out of the cane fields and put them to work what they brought them here for as cabinet makers.
So the Swedes came to Maui in 1881, and the Swede came to Maui in
1967. Yeah, October, on my birthday.
Really?
October 6th.
October 6th. Well, I think it all hasn't been just work, work, work. It looks to me like you've been having some fun here, too. I have a picture here of your first boat. This is terrific.
Oh, yes. That was a Kauai sampan, a wooden boat. That was the first boat we bought. That was after we'd only been here about a year when we bought that boat. And then it was easy to get a slip. We waited 1 week to get a slip. And the first slip was in Lahaina. And then one opened up in Malaya. So we moved up to Malaya Harbor and were there for at least 25, 30 years. And that was the first boat. But one of the first things us boys did was learn how to scuba dive. So we all got certified as scuba divers, and we loved to fish. So in those days of the old boat, we just had hand lines we let out the back, but we caught a lot of mahi and ono, and had a lot of fun. We had fun fishing. That was the second boat. That was a little 23-foot. Forget the make of it. That's not important. It was a fiberglass boat. So we went from wood to fiberglass. It was a nice little boat. We had a lot of fun on that. Did that for several years.
And then we went to.
Then we're growing now. Now we got I think it was a 32-foot. Had a nice cabin on it. Little cabin cruiser, and we did a lot of fishing from that boat. And that's the one we were on when we caught that. We won a tournament catching that big marlin.
Look at that.
So that's David on the right, and Joel August, who is now a judge, on the right, and me over here, and this is two of the grandchildren, Scott and Chris.
And a very large
Olsten.
fish.
Very large fish. We won the tournament on that.
Do you remember how big it was?
It was 500 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Plus.
Incredible. Well, you have had just a marvelous life. I can't imagine getting on an airplane, never having been to Hawaii,
Yeah.
and just setting your foot forward to adventure.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the best thing about your being here?
Probably the best thing was keeping our family together.
Mm-hmm.
We all live in Wailuku.
All 33?
33 of us, yeah, in separate homes. But we all live in Wailuku, and we see each other a lot. You know, having 13 great-grandchildren and 7 grandchildren, there's a lot of birthday parties. And the little ones still celebrate birthday parties for the little ones, the great-grandchildren, and that's fun. And it's great that we can be together as a family, you know. That's one thing I'm really grateful for, that we all live here. All 3 sons stayed here, and we stayed here, and this is it. This is it for us.
all
We're
about
all
family.
planning to still stay here. And, you know, it's just, we're so fortunate to live in a place like Maui. This is paradise. There's so many people that would love to live here, and we do live here. We have some relatives, cousins mostly, that are still living back in the mainland. And Shirley's sister and brother-in-law are back there. And we went back on a trip this year, a couple months ago, and visited. Many of them are in nursing homes now, and we visited them. But it's so far to go now. That was probably our last trip to the mainland. We usually go back to Mayo Clinic like once a year and get checked up and see how much longer they can make us live.
Well, why would you do anything else when you can live here?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about this. This is very interesting. What is this?
Well, in 2003, our company, T-Shirt Factory, was recommended by our bank, First Hawaiian Bank, Roger MacArthur, for a potential award for the Maui Small Business of the Year. So we attended that. We didn't know who was going to win. There were quite a few entries, and so we got first place in that.
This is beautiful.
And this is a matter of, you know, all working together. We have wonderful employees. We have 8 stores now, and we're all part of that. You know, we didn't win that because of one person or 2 persons. We won it because of all the workers in the company. We have wonderful employees. Lori Sakagawa has been with us for 25 years.
Really?
I think she just celebrated 26 years. So we've got employees who have been with us 7 years, 8 years, 2 years, 1 year. Always getting new employees sometimes. And it's getting harder and harder because Maui has the lowest unemployment rate in the whole United States, 2%. So it's a challenge, but we like challenges, and we have fun together. And in the old days, I used to walk into our retail stores and look for things that were wrong. Actually, I had a checklist on a clipboard, and I'd walk in, this is 20 years ago, and I'd walk in and say, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I found out that is not the way to do it. So the last 20 years, I've walked in looking for things that are right. And there's always something right. And by doing that, they want things to be right, so that, you know, they like to hear, wow, the store is really neat. You got everything folded so perfect, and so then it's neat and nice when I get there, because they like to hear that. Nobody likes to hear, oh, gee, it's a mess in here. How come you haven't straightened this up yet? So then it just comes automatic. You know, they automatically keep our stores really nice. So we're a great team. We have a wonderful team.
Teamwork.
And we work together. And just really fortunate.
Well, I'd like to also point out this marvelous plaque in the front here, because that was a very great honor. Can you tell me what happened here?
Well, I didn't know it was coming, but my youngest son, David, I don't know if his picture's probably there. I think I put it by the thing there. Yeah, that's David. Unbeknown to me, he had about 250,000 people apply and fill out applications to be a torch carrier
for
in the Olympics each year.
Yeah.
So he wrote a letter and sent it in about me, and I didn't know this. And then I didn't know for a whole year. And then a year later, we got a notice that I was going to carry the torch.
How wonderful.
So that was pretty exciting.
And didn't
that was one of the highlights of my life.
Didn't you tell me that you had broken your leg?
Oh yeah, before it was going to happen, about, I don't know, maybe a month or a couple weeks before, I fell in the house and broke my right leg. So I had a cast on it and was ready to cancel the thing. And my boys said, no, you're going. So I went to the doctor. He said it was okay, but he says, you'll never get through security with the cast on. So I have to take off the cast and put on a brace. So he took the cast off, put a nice big brace on, and I made it on my part that I was supposed to represent Wailuku. So I was right downtown Monterey, California, and I just barely made it to the end with that leg. But it worked, and I did make it, and it was a wonderful experience. Totally unexpected.
What were you thinking when you were carrying that torch? Can you remember any of your thoughts?
Yeah, I remember, but I'll probably get emotional, so I don't know if I can tell you. But probably the big part of it was family. Remembering my family that loved me, and this is why I'm doing this, and then knowing the great country, the free country that we live in, and having the opportunity to be born in a free country where we do things like this. And family is so important to me. I have a wonderful wife who's been a fantastic mother and still is. Now she's a mother and a grandmother and a great-grandmother. And, family is probably the most important thing in my life. And, we've been given a very spiritual life here in Hawaii. And, we love it. And our whole family, we talk together a lot, we pray a lot. I remember one time, I got to tell you this, Shirley was visiting the mainland, her sister and brother-in-law, and her brother-in-law follows hockey, really a hockey enthusiast. So he's talking about that and talking about other sports, and he turns to Shirley and said, well, what do you do? And Richard was, I don't remember how old he was, but he was just a young boy. And he says, my mother follows God. Because the brother-in-law says, who does she follow? Not a football team or a hockey ball team, and a hockey team. And he said, my mom follows God.
And look at the life it's led to.
Yeah. And our whole family is that way. We all are believers. We follow God and trust and faith and look for guidance every day and direction.
And you found it.
And we find it, yeah. God gives us intuitive thoughts and things to do, and they all kind of have the in them to help other people, help someone. Who can I help today? What's your will for me?
A wonderful attitude.
Yeah, and we're really fortunate because we all believe that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, you know, family is really important to us. And we have a fantastic family, and we can say to each other, I love you.
Very important.
And we do.
Well, Ole Olsten, I am so appreciative of your sharing your story with us. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Not that I can think of offhand, except this has been a wonderful experience here, and it has brought back memories, and they're good memories, wonderful memories. And it made me realize and reemphasize again how grateful we have to be for being with family, and have a family that we're all talking to each other.
Yes.
Really, and we all get along. And when we get together, it's peaceful. It's wonderful.
How wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It has been a real pleasure, and I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
You're watching MCC TV, Cable 55.
Welcome everybody, and like you heard, Frank Lloyd Wright designed this building. I don't know if you had the actual history of it. Original designs for this building started in 1948, I believe it was. Winfor family, anyway, in Fort Worth, Texas. It was supposed to be built there, and it was never built for various reasons. And so it went through another metamorphosis for somebody that was going to build it in Mexico, and it was never built. And then Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller asked Frank Lloyd Wright to design her a building, and he again changed the plan somewhat, made a design for her. Again, it was never built, supposedly because of the cost of building the building. His buildings were not cheap. They were everyone was unique, so obviously it was going to take a lot of money to put it together. And she died a couple years later, and Frank Lloyd Wright died also, I believe. And you guys know, right? You've been studying.
No, they don't remember. I think a year after he designed it for Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller, they were separated, and then I think a year later, Frank Lloyd Wright himself died. I may be wrong.
Right, 1959 he died, and Marilyn Monroe died in 57. The plans basically went into the mothballs at his design firm, which is called Taliesin West. He has a design firm that's still in operation in Arizona. And when the owners and the developers of this property started out, they wanted to have a Frank Lloyd Wright design. And so they went to Taliesin West, and they went through several different sets of plans, some that he'd actually designed for clubhouses, for golf courses, but they didn't feel that it fit the location properly. So they came upon this Marilyn, quote, the Marilyn Monroe house, And they really thought that, as you can see, this design sort of like fits into the hill. And so they took those designs, of course, changed them around from a private residential home, made them bigger, made it with spas and a cart barn for the golf carts and various public rooms and things like that, a commercial kitchen. But so the original plan sprang from his designs for Marilyn Monroe. And everything you can see here, from the designs in the carpet to the stained glass windows to the chandeliers, were taken from things that he had worked on in his lifetime and modified by Taliesin West, the architects there. And so you can see on the plaque over there, it's a certified by Taliesin West as a Frank Lloyd Wright home. All of his homes had a red tile. They call it the red tile, which he personally signed, that went into the building somewhere to show that it was he had had his hand in it.
Yeah.
There's our other buildings that have been built that are very similar in this theme of large barrel arches and the round and circular windows, half circular windows, the motif that you see on the trim work. All this is very reminiscent of that period of time. You might have studied a little bit, maybe the Falling Waters house. A lot of people know that. It's very slab-like and linear. That, I think, it was from his earlier works, and this is what he evolved into at this point in his career.